Ayakwi, Neknamalita, and this is my channel, The Midnight Librarian, and today I will be talking about my review of the Wayfarers series by Becky Chambers. So the Wayfarers series contains The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, A Closed and Common Orbit, Record of a Spaceborne Few, and The Galaxy and the Ground Within. So these 4 books, we follow different characters in each one. Some folks may argue that you don't necessarily have to read these in order. I would almost say to do so, just because there are some events in each one of these that the next one references, particularly when you go from The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet to A Closed and Common Orbit, as I feel like if you read The Closed and Common Orbit, something will be spoiled for you for The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. Ultimately, it's hard to describe the synopsis for each and every one. Well, aside from, I guess, The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, because A Closed and Common Orbit is from direct events from The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. But I guess I can easily go, The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet follows Rosemary Harper, who ends up leaving her Martian home to join the Wayfarer crew, a ship that bores holes into space and essentially makes space highways of sorts so that traveling through space is quicker. And in this particular book, in this particular book, she joins them just before they get a particularly nice contract in creating one of these space shortcuts near a small and angry planet that is just joining the essentially galaxy government, I guess, that is in place. Don't have any of these shortcuts near them, and so the Wayfarer crew has to travel there in order to create one. Along the way, we get to know each and every single one of the crew, and this is what made me fall in love with Becky Chambers' writing, is because there were members of the crew that I just couldn't see myself liking or enjoying, and ultimately Becky Chambers made me care about each and every single one and made me nervous that she was gonna kill them off. That one was really fun. It made me really eager to read the rest of the series, and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. The Closed and Common Orbit follows the direct events of A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, and we have 2 perspectives that we're kind of altering between. And we get to explore more of the galaxy of sorts and kind of learn what is and isn't accepted within this government that has been created within this galaxy, and kind of what happens on the outskirts of it. It's fairly emotional. I don't think it was as good necessarily as The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet in my mind, but it was still a good one to explore, especially when it comes to figuring out who you are and how your past reflects who you are and how you learn from it or can change yourself based on that. So I thought it was really fun. I ended up giving this 4.5 or 4 stars out of 5. Record of a Spaceborne Few. We're following multiple characters again. One of them in particular we have met very, very briefly in The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. They were kind of just mentioned. This one follows more of the humans in space and how they became spacers, and ultimately what different colonies seem like, basically what the difference is between humans who settled on Mars versus the humans who decided to go out and live on ships, how the differences and basically the connections they've made. I wasn't as impressed with this one as I was with the other 2. I think ultimately it was a 3 out of 5 star for me, mostly because it wasn't as interesting to me. I feel like it was a little chaotic. I wasn't sure what the point was. Yes, it was fairly interesting in terms of what the humans who are spacers were doing and how they were settling outside of a planet, and how they were keeping their history, and what their societal rules were, but ultimately it felt, I don't know, it felt odd. But I did still enjoy the messaging in terms of what it means to be home and what home means to you, and how, and to each one individually, and how you can easily change that. So it was interesting enough. I still fairly enjoyed it. It just was not as interesting to me as the other two. And then the Galaxy and the Ground Within, this is a little different in terms of we're stuck on a planet, actually, with a character that we have met before, and we're kind of stuck on one particular planet, and it's a rest stop of sorts, because there's so many of these little space shortcuts around it that it's kind of just used as a help in terms of being, as ships go to kind of rest for a couple hours, refuel, get food if they need, stretch their legs as they go on to the next port. And there can be like 3 to 4 hour delays. And in this one particularly, something ends up happening where no one can leave. And so we're following Pei, who we've met in the first one, as well as a couple of other characters that we recognize as species that we have met before, as well as one in particular that we've met before, but they are often understood. I like the messaging in this one in terms of what it means to colonize a planet. So, and the different struggles that these species end up having. I really enjoyed this one more than I thought I would, mostly because after the record of a spaceborne few, I didn't have high hopes for this, and it ended up turning out better than I thought. I would still give it like 4.5 out of 5 stars. I think I ended up giving it 4.75 because I did really enjoy it. It was just the hesitancy, I think. But ultimately, yeah, it was really fun. Ultimately, the series as a whole is really fun in terms of space exploration and the different species and folks we get to meet, as well as the different personalities. I really found it funny, particularly within A Galaxy and the Ground Within, as well as A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, of the weird nuances that humans have comparatively to other species. That was really fun, particularly in the exploration of cheeses and how other species in the galaxy find that just absolutely disgusting. So it was really fun in that respect. I am curious though, because there were questions that I had that weren't yet really explored. For instance, there was, I believe that they were called Gaius or something of the sort. It's been a while since I've read The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, but ultimately it was questioned, or not really questioned. There was like this moment where some of our characters in The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet end up meeting this faction of humans that are from Earth. Earth was destroyed by humans. It became non-livable, but they're trying to recreate it. Not recreate it, but they're trying to fix it. There are, I think they call them, Becky Chambers called them Gaius. But it's more kind of represented as a cult. In terms of wanting to go back to how things were, and that there are in fact humans still living on Earth in small societies and are more of hunter-gatherers. I was just ultimately curious of just like, okay, are they all cultists, or are some of them like really connected with their sense of place? For instance, Indigenous folks. Ultimately, as an Indigenous person and having a strong sense of place of where I am, which is a very privileged thing to be able to say, as an Indigenous person that is close to the original ancestral land that those who I'm descended from came from. But like a lot of Indigenous folks can't say that, right? But it's also the sense of place of just like, yes, I understand that I'm on Wiyot territory. I am not Wiyot, but I am Yurok, which is just north of Wiyot territory, and grew up partially on Hoopa territory as well, being a descendant from Hoopa. So I don't see a whole lot of people willing to give up their sense of place willingly, but I understand that there's that adaptiveness that and that kind of just sense of having no choice. For instance, there were bunch of indigenous tribes that were displaced during the colonization and genocide that took place throughout the United States when settler colonialism ended up spreading, right? And I think Jessica Hernandez talks about this in her book Fresh Banana Leaves, in the sense of just sense that the colonialism that ended up happening in South and Central America as well, and even the displacement of African Americans as they were brought over unwillingly to the United States, as well as to North America, as well as Central and South America. That it's something that indigenous folks from all over the world have had to deal with, but it makes me question how they would have dealt with it, knowing it that they may not be able to come back. So this is interesting to try to explain, of just like, yes, that ultimately a lot of tribes are reclaiming some of the territories that they once lost. I know that Wiyot people, for instance, were able to get back to Lowat, which its colonized name was Indian Island, which ultimately was an island within the bay that a massacre ended up happening. The Eureka City Council ended up giving back this island to the Wiyot territory, to the Wiyot tribe, which has never happened before. There are other tribes that are slowly starting to get their land back, whether through buying it back or through the local government giving it back. It's starting to become more of a thing, which is great. But there's some tribes that don't have that because they're not federally recognized for whatever reason, or much like because of Mexico's or Central and South America, there are no treaties, or they're just regarding indigenous people. They weren't colonized the same way. So it's curious to me how folks who have a strong sense of place, and maybe it's something that I'm not grasping because I have a sense of place, and maybe it seems, maybe I'm just thinking about it wrongly, and not in the right way, in terms of when it comes to folks, and particularly indigenous folks who have been displaced so far away from their ancestral land. Yes, we see it with other tribes, with like the Cherokee or Choctaw, where they were displaced because of the Trail of Tears, and they're in what is now known as their land, but it's not their ancestral land of sorts, but they made it work for them. I'm wanting to know how that would have worked in the Wayfarers series for folks to go up out of Earth, because it's one thing and it's a traumatic thing to see what was once your ancestral land and your sense of place be colonized and basically repurposed and changed due to development, etc. And to see it but not be able to access it for what you were once using it for, but to be forced or to willingly leave Earth and not be able to see it again. I'm curious how traumatic that was, or if it doesn't matter anymore because folks are spacers now, or now on Mars. I don't know. There was something about Gaius being seen as cultish that kind of questioned me. I can see how that can easily be brought about. I can see how there are plenty of white folks, particularly in America, that is like, this is my land, I'm not leaving this land. Because they have been there for generations. I can see them not leaving out of spite. There are plenty of people who do that now that are in dangerous situations in terms of like the radiation, or for instance, there's that part of America where it's constantly on fire because it fire underground, and it causes noxious gas to like vent out, and people don't leave their home for that either, or asbestos mining. We see it everywhere, in which people refuse to leave their home. I'm just curious how, because I think that's part of my problem with this one in particular, is that was there really no trouble getting all of humanity off of Earth and either on Mars or on spaceships? And I get that that it was kind of explained that folks jump from spaceship to spaceship all the time, or from space to island to like other planets. But there wasn't and we explored so much of other species in space, and that was great, but it makes me question of the different cultures that were found on Earth. What happened to it? Is it just now Martians versus spacers? I don't know. It was just, to me, it was almost kind of disappointing of just like there is so much different cultures within Earth that we're not seeing in this series. And I get it's because we see all these other species in other contexts of space, which is great. But in terms of this book in particular, there seems to be a lack of cultural differences within the human race, human species. So I don't know. I think that's ultimately which was disappointing in the fact that Gaius are kind of considered cultish, as opposed to, it could be a group of indigenous scientists that are trying to figure out how to be able to save some of the flora and fauna that was once on Earth, or to be able to restore it to what it once was as a sense of ancestry, or I don't know, just something. I don't know. I think that was ultimately what was kind of disappointing about the series as a whole. Unlike, for instance, the Newsflash series, which I know is completely different, more of a zombie horror. For instance, for the Newsflash, there was like questions I ended up having as the series went on, and Mira Grant ended up answering some of those. And it's probably just it was kind of a fluke, right? Of just like I ended up questioning the right things and got the answers to them, as opposed to the Wayfarers series by Becky Chambers, where some of my questions aren't answered because maybe I'm not thinking of the right questions, or potentially that Becky Chambers didn't think that far into some of these things. I don't know. And that's kind of my thought process. Ultimately, did enjoy the series. I just felt that there was more to be desired in terms of humanity and the differences that make us all so unique. Particularly like when it came to Indigenous folks or the different cultures. It's just, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe that's being selfish. But yeah, ultimately, as a whole, I feel like this series is 4 out of 5 stars. I highly suggest you check it out. I am trying to wrap this up rather quickly now because I see my battery light flashing at me. So if you read the series, let me know what your thoughts were down in the description down below. I know it's one of a series that if a booktuber has read it, it tends to be one of their favorites. Yes, it's one of my favorites, but not without some criticism. So if you've made it this far, let's put the moon or some kind of planet, some kind of space thing in the rocket ship. Let's do a rocket ship emoji down in the comments down below. Otherwise, if you have yet to do so already, subscribe, click the thumbs up button if you've enjoyed this video, and I hope that you are in the mental mindset to enjoy your reading. I will see you in another video very soon. Cheers.